This week, we will be performing a titration of a weak acid with a strong base. We will use a pH meter and a computer software to generate a titration curve where we will see the equivalence points of our titration and use the data to determine Ka and the concentration of our acid solution. Let's get started. In this step, we're going to flush out our burette using our sodium hydroxide solution. We'll fill our burette with some sodium hydroxide to get the walls of the burette covered in our sodium hydroxide. Then we can open our stopcock to release all that sodium hydroxide into our waste beaker. With the stopcock closed, we can add our sodium hydroxide again, and this time we want to go past the 0 mark. Or after we have to tap our burette again, we want to remove any air bubbles. Putting our burette back onto the ring stand. We'll slowly open our stopcock to release the sodium hydroxide into the end right here. This is full, and now we can start our titration with the meniscus here showing at 0.5 milliliters. That'll be our initial starting point. In this next step, we're going to prepare our trial 1 acid solution using maleic acid. We're going to transfer 10 milliliters of this maleic acid quantitatively using a 10 milliliter volumetric pipette. So first we have to insert our volumetric pipette into our Erlenmeyer flask containing the maleic acid. We'll take our bulb and we'll draw up 10 milliliters carefully. And the point of this is we're trying to get to the line on the volumetric flask. So we overshoot purposely and then let that drain a little bit slowly until we get to the line. Once we're at the line, we know that we have 10 milliliters exactly in here. We can transfer this out to our trial 1 beaker, and we just let that drain slowly. Once our 10 milliliters are completely out of our volumetric pipette, we'll take some DI water here. We have 20 milliliters of it, and we can add that to our solution. We have a stir bar in here already, so now we can place this onto our hot plate. Okay, now we're going to add our pH probe to our trial 1 solution. We'll remove it from the storage solution here, and we'll add it carefully into the solution, being sure not to touch the bottom of the beaker and not to hit the magnetic stir bar. Once it's in the solution, we can see that the pH drops pretty dramatically, as we would expect considering it is an acid. Now we can begin our titration. We have our burette filled with our sodium hydroxide. Up to the 0 mark, we'll use that as our starting point. And so now we can begin titrating by adding just half a milliliter of our NaOH by opening the stopcock. Now that we've added about half a milliliter, we can see that the pH increased by a little bit. And so now we can add another half a milliliter So we're at 0.5 milliliters now. We'll add half a mil. We'll get to 1. The pH increased again, as we can see, and we'll just do this continuously at half milliliter increments until we see a huge change. So now we're about 1.5, and we're up to 2.5 on the pH scale there. We'll add another half a mil. So now that we're at 2 milliliters, our pH increased again. .5. Now we're at 2.94. And essentially what we're just doing is continuously doing this until we get a pH of about 12 or higher for a pretty long period of time. Now that we have our data and our curve, we can use this information to calculate the Ka values, and we can determine what the concentration of our maleic acid was.